You're announcing this morning that you're resigning as Secretary of the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party. Why are you taking that step?
Well, Lyndall, over the last week or so we've seen some pretty terrible tactics, I think. People out there being pretty free with their language and giving Kevin Rudd a very hard time, I think. And I don't think that that's appropriate tactics. I think they're very counterproductive. I think in the end they'll bring the whole party into disrepute. And I don't think I could sit by and remain as the caucus secretary, and in effect these positions require you to have some discretion, I think, but publicly. I didn't think I could do that while people were out there every day as part of a deliberate strategy criticising Kevin Rudd. I didn't think it was appropriate, and I wanted to send a message to my colleagues that this ballot should be conducted in a fair and decent way. It should be conducted where everybody respects one another and where everybody, is pretty careful about character assessments, I think.
Kevin Rudd gave a few character assessments of Julia Gillard this morning. Isn't he guilty of the same thing?
Well, I think it's different when it's the candidates, obviously, and obviously when you've had your record attacked for a whole week, you're entitled to defend your record. And I think that's appropriate. But all I've got to say is I don't think that going out there every day of the week giving pretty horrid assessments of one another's characters is in the interest of the party. I don't think anybody should do it, but it has been a pretty torrid week of that happening.
What are the chances of uniting the party after this is over, or will the divisions run deep and for a long time?
Well, that's the concern. I think that if this continues, that it makes that process much more difficult, much harder. And I think it's in everybody's interests to make sure that they conduct themselves appropriately. I don't think going out there and criticising people and giving unfair character assessments every day is warranted. And I think particularly, I mean, it's one thing if people are losing their cool in the moment, in the heat of the moment, that's one thing. But when it's I think a deliberate strategy, I don't think that's acceptable to the caucus, and I don't think it should be acceptable to the public either.
Are you surprised that it's the Deputy Prime Minister who's made the strongest attack on Mr Rudd?
Well, like I said, I don't think anybody should be making these sorts of character assessments. I don't care if it's a backbencher or if it's, the highest office in the land. We should be careful about our public commentary, and particularly after such a torrid week, we should just try and cool our jets. We should try and be more moderate in our language. It does surprise me how people can oscillate between discipline and these pretty desperate attacks within the blink of an eye. I find it very surprising indeed, and I just hope that people moderate their language and moderate the character assessments that are going on.
Mr Rudd hasn't yet said whether he will stand in the ballot on Monday. If he has, have you made up your mind whether you would support him or Julia Gillard?
Well, look, I've resolved to support Kevin Rudd. I think Julia Gillard is a very good person. I think she's a great legislator. But I do think that Kevin Rudd is best placed to win the confidence of the people and to reassure Australians at this pretty delicate time in the international economy. And one of the things that, if you like, bolstered that decision, it was a difficult decision to make, but when I got to my office this morning, I got there early, and someone had put a receipt on my window and attached it there with chewing gum, and it says, "Put Kevin Rudd back as PM. People voted for him." I think that's a pretty strong message just from somebody passing by my office in a pretty crude way to send the caucus a message. And I think what the party's got to decide is whether it chooses a leader for itself or whether it chooses a leader for the country. And I think if we're choosing a leader for the country, we'll choose Kevin Rudd.
One final question. Have you had your pre-selection threatened or been told to resign your party position because of your support for Mr Rudd?
No, and in South Australia I've always encountered nothing but civility and decency in South Australia, so I don't believe I have any problems in that regard.
So you don't believe you'll have any problems being pre-selected for the next election?
Well, no one can ever presume these things, but I don't think that my decision today will make any effect on internal party deliberations.